Welcome everyone to a conversation with Julie Morath, a legend in patient safety leadership. Today's webinar is presented by the University of Illinois at Chicago Patient Safety Leadership Programs. In today's session, Julie will share the story of her career and work related to transparency in healthcare, including her work on the Quadruple Aim initiative. Julie will also give insight on career development and opportunity. Today's session is hosted by the Patient Safety Leadership Programs here at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And the session will be hosted by Patient Safety Leadership Assistant Program Director, George Vukotic. Before we get started here, my name is Sean Betcher. I've been helping really on the administrative side of the PSL program for a number of years, but I would like to introduce the current program advisor for the Patient Safety Leadership Program, Sharon Lanza. And Sharon, I invite you to go ahead and essentially say hello and add anything that you'd like to add.
Thank you so much, Sean. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Patient Safety Leadership Program, we're so glad to have you with us today. We'll have a slide about this, I think, maybe after the conversation, but I wanted to just mention that we currently offer a Master of Science degree as well as a certificate option. And we're now accepting for fall 2021 with a deadline of July 15th. Oh, thank you. Perfect. UIC is a pioneering founder in patient safety education, and the program is intended for current health professionals to become thought leaders and for people who have a strong commitment to the field of patient safety and an interest in improving the quality of healthcare. We're so honored to have Julie here with us today. And please feel free to email me at any time or call with any questions, and I'll do my very best to help you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. And that was great coverage of this slide. So glad we had that up. This is sort of the two programs that are part of the two programs that are part of the Patient Safety Leadership programs, the Masters and the certificate, and Sharon's contact information there is at the bottom. So really at this point, I will go ahead and we'll get the conversation started. So I'll turn it over to Patient Safety Leadership Assistant Program Director and Professor George Vukotic. George?
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it. I have to tell everybody, it's truly an honor to have Julie Morath in this program. I started teaching and working with the program at UIC back in 2012. And at the time, I had some healthcare background. I'd spent about 10 years in the military with working in healthcare. And then also getting into the patient safety leadership was a newer area. But at the top of the list, Julie Morath's name kept coming up again and again. A little bit of background on Julie. Julie is currently the president and CEO of the Hospital Quality Initiative. It's a collaboration of California hospitals and healthcare different associations, which supports actually over 400 hospitals and healthcare systems in California. In addition to that, Julie has been the recipient of the John Eisenberg Award for Individual Lifetime Accomplishment in Patient Safety. And from there, it just goes on and on. She's the founding member of the Lucian Leap Institute related to patient safety. And we'll talk a little bit more about that program. She's on multiple boards. Her academic experience is incredible. She's done everything from work with Children's Hospital and clinics in Minnesota to going down to Vanderbilt University and then to being in California. And she's also an author. She's published a couple of articles. So with that, I got to welcome Julie Morath. Julie, welcome to the program.
Thank you, George. It's so nice to be here. I really appreciate it. I have one update on my background, and that is I just recently retired from the Hospital Quality Institute in California. However, I have not slowed down, and I'm still very much involved with all our 400 hospitals.
I know, and even some of our students, Kim Werkheimer, for example, has mentioned that you have an incredible work ethic. And she says, if you ever have a chance to work with someone like Julie or work with Julie, you have to jump on the experience. So while you may be retired in name, I'm sure you're still doing a lot of things. And I think there's so much that individuals can learn from you and hopefully will learn from you in today's program. But Julie, let me ask you, how did it all get started? Where did you first get your start in patient safety leadership? How did it all start?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
It was not an intentional focus at the time. So I'd spent almost 3 decades in executive positions in healthcare organizations, usually in a VP of clinical care or chief nursing officer. Mm-hmm. So I worried about safety and quality all the time. I was a big champion of improvement projects, spot improvements. And I was tapped in Minnesota to join the new team at Alina. And I was tapped to help pull together with the whole system of 50 some outpatient and ambulatory clinics, 12 hospitals or so, and a health plan of over 1 million members to have a coherent quality effort. And the reason was because the CEO believed that I had the right stuff in terms of understanding engagement and culture. And that's what he wanted as part of his team. So I thought that'd be interesting. So I said yes. Now, this is where I got hooked on patient safety. Gordon Springer was the CEO's name, and he got a letter from Harvard School of Public Policy. And it was an invitation to attend the Harvard Executive Sessions on medical accident. Lucian Leap had a very strong hand in pulling that together, but its roots were in community policing.
Oh.
So Gordon asked me to take a look at it, and he said, what do you think about this patient safety thing? I said, well, from what I'm seeing, I think it's going to be really big. And I think you want to be at the table. So he agreed to do it if I attended with him, did all the background work, and was a full participant for 3 years. So it took me a nanosecond to say, yeah, I'm in. And I left there with new lenses, completely new lenses to look at healthcare. And I was humbled to realize that while I was a champion, I was working at the wrong level of aggregation within the environment to really make the kinds of major changes that safe care requires. And I couldn't turn back after seeing that opportunity.
So that seemed like a seminal event for you. That was like really a turning point career-wise. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it was. And the other thing that was my generation, we didn't have much in clinical training. I'm a nurse by background, around improvement or safety science or reliability science. In fact, nothing. And so the scholarship and the research was so important because that allows change, that allows things to go to scale. And that's why I admire programs like yours, that you're preparing people for the long run and the sustainability of the work.
I think it's a very important field, and it's people seem to enjoy being in the field. I think it's one of the opportunities in healthcare where you can have a major impact and make a real difference. So I think I'm with you totally on the educational aspect. Julie, speaking of education, let me ask you, we use the Harvard case studies in our program, which I think are very well done. And it seemed to focus a lot of light on you and how you, I guess, became a rock star at Children's Hospital and Clinics. How did that all come about? And, how did you get to the role you got into? How were you able to make the changes that you made to turn the organization around? And then how did Harvard do the case study? I guess I'm curious on all those areas.
Okay. So Children's was looking for a chief operating officer. And I was known in the upper Midwest as being a pretty reasonable manager. I had success in that area. So the CEO, Brock Nelson, said he wanted someone like me. And the headhunter said, well, why don't you get her? He said, well, I don't think that'll be possible. And so we started talking, and I was very clear, I don't want to be a chief operating officer. However, I will do it if you let me organize and operate the organization through the lens of patient safety and quality. And I will commit that all the other metrics, reputation, market share, finances, will all follow. But if we can't get the product right and build the trust and fidelity with those that trust us to serve, the other things don't matter. And they were in a recruitment mode. So Brock and the board said, okay, let's go. They had no idea what that meant. So I started just working away. It's a huge portfolio. So some folks see it pretty intimidating and may think, wow, how do we change the whole culture? Because you can't inoculate an organization. But what you can do is to identify and elevate what's working really well and diminish those parts that aren't helpful.
Got
And-
it. Julie, let me ask you, Julie, it seemed like you made a lot of changes to the overall culture. What were some of the, I guess, maybe the 3 or 4 biggest challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them to get things to shift or to change the culture there?
Okay, so George, if I could back up, one thing I took out of the Harvard executive session is what they called a patient safety manifesto. It was after the 3 some years.
Okay.
And well, I didn't know quite where or how to start. I just knew that things could be safer and better. But this manifesto provided a roadmap, if you will. And there were 7 or 8 points. So it was declare patient safety urgent and a priority, accept executive responsibility. This is my watch. This is my priority. Assign accountability. Right? Hope is not a strategy kind of thing. Import new knowledge and skills. So interprofessional learning, and engagement was a big part of that. Align external controls. So I went out and started talking to malpractice attorneys, the editorial staffs of the papers, the health department, and other regulators saying, this is what we intend to do here, and how you relate to us can either have a chilling effect on our common interest of providing safe care for the population, or you can help enable it by not taking criminal action, not sensationalizing when things go bad, because then you miss the systemic. And so did a lot of spade work in that area. Then established a reporting and learning system. When things went wrong, they went to risk management and into the legal system. And you can't improve what you can't see and what you don't know. And then accelerating change with appropriate aims and measures that kind of chunk things out, and then engage parents, families, the workforce. So I knew that those were the things I had to cover, and then turn to the wisdom of the folks who work there to help co-create exactly what the strategies and changes would look like. So the U.S. World and News Report got a hold of what we were doing. And in 2000, we had a 7-page spread, and I'm getting to the case study, on the cover of U.S. News and World Report. We were not a best hospital, but we were one with potential. So the old Yogi Berra thing, potential's what you got when you haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
That was us. But there was a lot of energy and interest, and a child that we almost killed with a massive overdose was on the cover with his intensivist and his parents. And that's what got the attention of Amy Edmondson and the Harvard group, who also worked with the writer from US News and World Report, and inquired as to whether they could follow us at Children's as a case study.
Got it. So if I understand you correctly, Julie, you actually started looking to stakeholders outside of the children's hospital and clinics when you mentioned attorneys and regulators and some others. So it actually started with you having this framework that you brought from Harvard, and then you reached out to the community, or what I would say external stakeholders as well as internal. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah. You know, this work is hard because the history of healthcare is kind of criticize and blame, and people want heads to roll when something goes wrong. So that invites a certain secrecy. I mean, it's hard, it's painful. And so the one thing we wanted to do was to make sure that there was alignment to change the inside culture and the outside cultures that related to the inside. We also work with unions around these issues.
Got it. So now you've got the framework ready to go, and then get the attention from Harvard, maybe not in the best way originally, but how did that relationship develop with Amy Edmondson over at Harvard? And then, like I say, the case studies are great. If any individuals haven't seen those, they're really good pieces of work to help from a learning perspective. So how did that whole process develop then, that relationship in the process of creating those case studies?
Well, Amy Edmondson, I think, is genius in how she writes case studies. So, but she and some of her doctoral students moved in with us.
Oh, really? Physically?
Yeah. And over a period of time, began to examine and talk with people throughout the organization. Now, we had to get our board okay with that, the staff okay with that. But we thought, it was the right thing to do. We weren't looking for publicity or attention. I was just doing my job, as was everyone else. But the notion was, if there's that much focus on this, maybe others can learn from both what we've accomplished and the landmines we stepped on that would help accelerate patient safety in the country. And so we took it to the family advisory, took it to the ethics committee, took it to our board, and everyone said, yeah, let's do it. The risk is low. Well, the risk wasn't really low, but it was tolerable. They were willing to accept it, to say, this is a contribution that we can make.
Got it. No, very, very good. And then in your time at Children's Hospital and Clinics, again, major cultural change. What if somebody asks you, what are your 2 or 3 main accomplishments that you feel you've accomplished there? What would you say that they were?
I think the level of engagement, we became kinder to each other and more transparent and team-based. So one of the big interventions, it was around education. And doctors used to learn from doctors, nurses from nurses, pharmacists from pharmacists, and you know how that silo kind of works its way out. Well, what we did is developed quarterly intraprofessional education, brought in outside experts. We used families as faculty, and people, it started maybe 25 people came, but there was standing room only about 2 years into it. And it was set up so that people were mixed up. And we had environmental service workers and dietary, as well as administrative folks. And in between the sessions, there were assignments, like check this out, review this, begin to get to Gemba and really see work, not as you imagine it's being done, but how is it really being done?
Got it. So
And
the
then-
process, I'm just thinking from, actually my time in the military and working with healthcare was much more of a command and control. Like you had the surgeon in charge and pretty much he, and at the time it was he directed everything and everybody else just listened, whether they agreed or not, they just did what they were told. So it sounds like you were able to open it up and get a lot more communication going at different levels.
Yeah, it took a while. And as you might imagine, from area to area, the subcultures, some adopted earlier than others. But what I feel really good about it became children's as a whole, and the ability to, what I call them culture carriers. We get together and look at policies like around escalation of concern, communication, use of different tools and techniques based on evidence. And if we didn't have evidence, then we implemented in such a way that was evidence generating and really paid attention to it. So I feel good about flattening the hierarchy, but knowing that you always defer to expertise and that someone has to be looking over the entire organization and watching the patterns to see if there's any disruption brewing out there. So I felt very good about that. I also felt good about installing a blameless, and that's not to be confused with not accountable, reporting system that was central, and the risk was not reporting. So we went down the iceberg from events everyone knows to starting to look at near misses, risky situations, vulnerabilities, and began to systematically address those where the greatest leverage was.
And I think, Julie, you mentioned something in the articles mentioned about good catch logs, and that was a part of changing the culture. How did that come into play?
Yeah, thanks, George.
Yeah.
One of the things we were interested in is not the mechanism necessarily, but getting the intelligence about what was going on. So we really looked toward each clinical unit, and they developed safety action teams and put in place these good catch logs, which was a simple notebook on the front desk of the unit. And anyone in the environment, including parents, could enter something rather than we still didn't have all the baggage out of the way of the incident report, that were largely punitive or people ratted one another out instead of talk to each other. And so that kind of freed up and created greater awareness that people began to really become situationally aware and more risk aware of their environment. And we used to summarize those and get them back to the unit. And then when you're working in this level of complexity, we had just really simple rules, like they choose something, let's say smart pumps. Fix what you can, communicate what you fixed, and find someone who can fix what you cannot. And that's when it went to a patient safety professional or to a quality professional who helped the translation throughout the organization.
Got it. So you're able to take, I guess, the lessons learned and then share them throughout the organization. It seemed like that was very impactful and a big part of changing the culture.
Yeah. I think it began to open up and unleash the talent and the implicit knowledge that people working have.
Oh.
And that had a very freeing effect. The other really interesting thing, George, was that as we opened up this space to begin to talk about things going wrong and being more transparent, my office became a drop-in place for people who'd been involved in an event that harmed a child or a child died as a result, that dated back 10 years or more, but they'd never been able to voice it. It got wrapped up in secrecy, and they were told not to talk about it. And so, the caregivers themselves carried these burdens. And it had a real healing effect to begin to work through and recognize that these events are certainly focused on patients, but the workforce also carries a big burden when these things happen. So how we began to look at how things go wrong both defines a culture, but it also shapes a culture. So
that's a very important point.
Yeah.
It's not just the patients or the individuals or the providers and administrators. It's everybody is impacted in some way. Actually, I think there's some big parallels to what you see going on today with the COVID environment that we're in.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Wow. So great experience over at Children's Hospital and Clinics. Then from there, it looks like you made a couple of stops. You went to Vanderbilt Medical Center to be the chief safety officer, and then to California. Can you give us a little bit more on the next step in your career?
So, while I was at Children's, I was going into my 10th year, I think. I got a call from Vanderbilt, and they were looking for a CEO of their children's hospital. And it was the same thing. I really don't want to do that. But if you ever have something come up, because I love the integration of research, education, and operations. And this chief position of quality and patient safety allowed me to move very fluidly, not only among the academic departments and faculty, but to also work with trainees and students and staff. So that was really fun. And I learned a lot there. We started, Vanderbilt, like academic medical centers, had a very high self-esteem. So it was like, what do you mean we need a patient safety, And so we begin, I call it inquiry-based leadership, asking questions like, was your experience rounding everything that you would hope it to be? Mm-hmm. Were there some things that happened in care that you'd rather not see repeated? And so we started talking about the experience, and people began to see, oh, yeah, we could be doing this better. We could be more aligned, more coordinated. And so we developed a very robust blueprint for quality there. And everyone's fingerprints were all over it. And that was fun. And I think the other thing we were able to do there, and the department chairs were magnificent, is that we were able to align attending, resident, trainee, and operations focus, so that, like you often see, there are multiple points of bright light, but nothing hangs together. So you don't realize a full impact. We were able to orchestrate alignment with that. And we is a really important operative word there. It took a lot of, I could do the research and tee up, and I know I handled the measurement and reporting, so I knew what was going on, that we could begin to create an environment where said, this is important, but this is really what will provide the greatest impact for improving care.
So great work at Children's in Minnesota, then to Vanderbilt, and then to California.
Yeah, that was really an interesting thing. By now, I've gotten what I call radical clarity about what I want to do. and how my career could unfold.
Mhm.
And I was really very happy at Vanderbilt. But I was also a member of the Joint Commission board at the time. And I was sitting in a board meeting next to a gentleman who knew me because he was a Joint Commission reviewer when I was at Children's. And he loved what he saw. He was a chief medical officer at the time and brought a whole team back with him to kick the tires and take a look. And it began to dispel, oh, you can do this in pediatrics, but it never worked with adults. Well, he made that translation. And we were sitting there and they were talking about pulling together for alignment and impact many different quality initiatives, organizations, and associations across California. And he said, who do you think could do that? And I said, well, I gave him some names. And he said, no, we're thinking maybe you. And I thought, no, no. And he said, well, just come out and interview. And I did. And it was California. And I liked the people I met. I liked the vision. And something on that scale, I had really never dealt with before. And to be able to also manage a huge CMS government grant was challenging. And so I had a chat with my family and we came to, oh, why not? And so the rest is history. I was there.
Great, great. Julie, I got to tell you, as I was preparing, to do the interview, to get things together, I talked to one of, I guess, a colleague of yours, actually a student of ours. I didn't realize she was a colleague of yours at the time, Kim Workmeister. And she said, George, you got to talk to Julie about quadruple aim. So rather than take it down the wrong direction, tell us about quadruple aim, its goals, what you're doing, and the direction.
Okay. So this is a real passion of mine now. And one of the reasons to extricate from a lot of the operational stuff so I can focus on these things. In 2008, Don Berwick conceptualized the triple aim, right? A better individual care, better health for a population, and reduced cost, largely through reducing waste. Okay. So one of the threads that I've always been concerned about is the experience of the workforce. And the experience of the workforce is the backbone to accomplish these three things, the triple aim. Mm-hmm. And so as I spoke with a colleague and Lucian Leap, we started thinking about what if we started talking about a quadruple aim, which includes meaningful work.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And so how did that evolve? So you had the triple aim, now you're taking it to quadruple. How did that come together? You had some conversations. How did you move it from where it was to where it is today and where it's going in the future? Okay.
Mm-hmm. The Lucian Leap Institute, maybe 10 years ago, developed what they called, or we called, transforming concepts for healthcare. And there's research and a paper related to each one of these, free, downloadable on the website. So one thing that I advocated very strongly for, and informed by, I think, working so closely with clinicians, was we can't have better care, lower costs, without the full engagement of the workforce in what's meaningful and brings them joy. And so one of the papers we did was Through the Eyes of the Workforce, Joy and Meaning in Healthcare for Greater Safety. And inspired by the outcomes of that, we started talking about quadruple aim, and it kind of caught on. People are using that now. And I think it rounds out a very critical element of our healthcare system. And I think we all feel the pain and the angst with our healthcare workforce now and what they're going through. And it's a very dramatic punctuation, but it's been there all the time in some form. So meaningful work is, skill, task fit, and having the right things, being respected, and working in an environment that's safe, psychologically safe, where people are not harmed physically, needle sticks, falls, or psychologically by how they're treated, but rather seen as people who create safety every day. They don't hurt people intentionally. And I think that got really messed around with early on, and we had to kind of recalibrate. So that's what the quadruple aim to me is, and it's the experience of the healthcare worker. And by that, I mean physicians, CEO, all the way through to those who directly care for patients or support the care of patients or the environment of care that they're in. And I think that that's really the next big hurdle.
Julie, let me ask you, related to that, you've had some incredible success in convincing or influencing, senior levels in leadership on how to move ahead and move forward. For the listeners we have that are, maybe in patient safety and maybe at that mid-level or getting started, any keys to success and how to influence the organization in a bigger way, or how to move, patient safety forward in a bigger way?
Yeah. Well, you can't blink. There's a clarity of thought, and very often senior staff in an organization are insulated from what's really happening. And my thing, and I don't usually talk about it publicly, is that once you get the CFO engaged, you've got it.
The money.
Yeah. So I would, and early in my career, I didn't want patient safety contaminated by finance and cost, and kept it in kind of a incubator until it was time. But I've come to appreciate that you can and should assign direct savings as a result of doing things right, or cost avoidance by doing things right. And I would take charts and sit down with the CFO and go through them and be able to sum up how much additional resource and dollars were spent as a result of having a preventable complication or a medical error of some sort. Medication error being one of the more vibrant pieces.
Julie, I think that's a major point. Too often, the accounting types tend to look at money spent rather than costs avoided. So I think that's a very, very key point.
Yeah. And there's pretty solid research out there. It really helps if you can get your own data and convince, but you can be really helped by looking at what the research is saying.
Very good. Julie, one more, and then I want to open it up for some questions. But for somebody just starting out in the field, nowhere to the field, maybe they're working in nursing or administrating in some other area, what advice would you have for them in trying to
my advice is to do your homework. I mean, be prepared. I think passion and intent coupled with information and strategy is very important. The other is developing your network. In every environment that I've worked in this space, I've had lots of cups of coffee with people to get them onboarded, if you will, and then having different mechanisms so that folks can help with the work, help with the convincing, and see that things can be different. So it takes patience. I would take executives on rounds with me, talk with the staff. And one thing that made people uncomfortable, but it worked, was to interview staff about where do you think the next opportunity to harm a patient might be.
Interesting.
And it would take about a nanosecond for them to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if it's collected, you've got a nice portfolio of qualitative data that can be put together. And it gives, you know, rounding happens because people relationship and chatting, but to have very purposeful safety rounds and be willing to put the time in to help prepare your executive team to hear is really important.
Got it. Julie, great insights. Sean and Sharon, I know we've got a number of individuals, you know, involved. I'd like to open it up however you want to handle this and maybe ask Julie a few questions from the people we have participating in the program.
Yes, perfect. Yep. So please, everyone. So thank you, George. Thank you, Julie. And let's go ahead. And if you all have questions for Julie, please go ahead and either type them into the chat and we'll read them out loud. You do all have the ability as well to unmute yourselves. We just ask if you're going to do that, everybody not try to speak over each other so we don't get feedback and start to ask your questions.
I have one question for Julie.
Sure, go right ahead.
Hi, Julie. This is Sayed. I'm a practicing anesthesiologist, and I also did my master's in patient safety from the University of Illinois. I just wanted to get your advice. While you were in the executive positions, one of the problems which I face at my hospital is the disconnect from the board and the executive positions with what's happening at the frontline level. I feel that the middle management or the middle managers are the shield, acts as a shield between what's happening at the front line from reaching the executive position. So how do we overcome that barrier? How do we get that approach where you said the team-based approach, where the middle managers are actively involved and there is an area of transparency from the lower frontline level to higher up to the board level?
Yeah, that is a great question and sits at the heart of a lot of the change that has to take place. So I'm a big proponent of partnerships, that there's an operations nurse or other background person paired with a physician leader so that they are leading in concert and having a like voice, to go back to the medical staff. The other is being transparent with your reporting so that the board is constantly seeing what your performance is. And then, you know, ultimately they've got the responsibility for what happens in the organization. And it's not okay to not know. And if they're not asking, that's something that governance needs to learn how to do. So in a role of patient safety director, you can be really key in helping prepare your board, certainly with the knowledge and support of the CEO, on how to be a responsible board member to look at the quality, performance, and safety of an organization as it affects those they serve. The other thing is, if you can orchestrate a vision, and this sounds soft, but I think it'd be helpful. At Children's, we came up with a vision that we will be the safest healthcare system in the world, and then get even safer. And people gulped and thought, what are you smoking? Or, just really questioning that. But, we may never get there, probably never will, but we owe nothing less to those who trust us to care for them than to aim for that every single day. And that vision actually kind of carried people through. That, we can aspire to this. And that, instead of always looking at what's wrong and bridging it or fixing it, to also have aspirations and inspiration out there. It gives people something to grab a hold of and move toward as well. Did I answer your questions yet?
Yeah, you did. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. That was a great question. Other questions? You can either type them in or again, feel free to unmute. We have a little bit of time here left. I think we were scheduled till 3.
And I have one that popped up.
Sure.
Julie popped up on my screen. And I think you touched on some of it, but what are your tips to success for overcoming resistance in an organization? So I don't know if there's an easy answer.
Oh, that. Yeah. So my philosophy is that people act reasonably and responsibly given the information they hold and the point of view that they're expressing and experiencing. So I never try to talk the resistance into getting on board, but rather I carefully craft questions to help them come along and get out of the trap that they might find themselves in. The other thing I've learned through the years is that people won't discredit themselves. So if they've made a very definitive statement about, this is all our family needs, we're safe here, it's got to be very carefully navigated to provide information that may have them rethink the position they're taking. So data is really important.
I think more and more so, yeah. We even with looking at the technologies now, starting to dabble a little bit more in areas like artificial intelligence and the data analysis, I think that's going to continue to be a bigger area of interest and opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Good.
All right.
Try to stay away from opinion and dueling opinions. Always appreciate the point of view of the other and bring forth data.
Good
That's
point.
great. So a couple more questions came in. They're popping up all over now, so this is great. We're getting the conversation going. This is for Julie. So Julie, given your experience in the field, just how has the field evolved? And could you perhaps comment on what the future of patient safety looks like?
Okay, big question. I've been at this a long time, so I'm impatient. And I think our progress has been consistent, but consistently sluggish. I have not seen it move at the rate that I had anticipated originally. But when you look at, I think the adoption rate in healthcare has cycled up, but it used to be like 17 years or something. So, it would be about right. I think the future of patient safety will be I think it's going to be one of the most important things that healthcare organizations are going to focus on. And leadership is going to be critical. So, George, you mentioned artificial intelligence and advanced analytics and, lab feeds, those things that are requiring time and attention now will be happening and find its way into the hands of those who have to make decisions. So that's when you can convert all that extra energy toward patient safety education, and getting deeper and deeper. We're still kind of at waterline with events, above the water that you see.
Yeah, the iceberg model. Yeah,
the iceberg. Getting down to better understanding the risk, and I think patient safety will evolve to reliability science and reliable systems. We've spent a lot of time on people, rightly so, because our field is so people intensive. But the real keys are going to be in reliable system design, and patient safety will hold that, I believe.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Thank you, Julie. Couple more questions. Do you have any thoughts on engaging external stakeholders on understanding patient safety as a primer to the delivery of healthcare?
As a primer, in terms of educational content?
So Dana, I'll wait for you to maybe chat.
Hi there, this is Dana Faber. Thank you.
Perfect.
Great program, Julie.
Hi, Dana.
Hi there. I guess my question is, and it's partly a comment, I suppose, and you've answered part of the question by the other questions that have come in, and that's really getting external stakeholders to understand that without patient safety, the delivery of healthcare will continue to be unsafe. We have a lot of talk about patient safety being number one, patient safety first, it's even, touted on billboards and touted in marketing schemes for different healthcare organizations. But how do you see, and I'll give an example of maybe pharmaceutical companies, device manufacturers, commercial insurers, as myself, I work for a malpractice insurer, which we're very engaged as patient safety. We have a department of patient safety. Yep. How do you see these external stakeholders really being a part of the overall patient safety delivery of healthcare in using patient safety as that universal mindset?
If healthcare isn't safe, nothing else is going to work. So it does take an entire network. The device industry, the health insurance industry, how decisions are made. Access is often not seen as a patient safety issue, but delay in care certainly is. And I'm pleased to see that more and more medical schools, nursing schools, schools of pharmacy, business schools that have a focus on the healthcare industry are introducing curriculum to begin to get people thinking from day one. The other thing is that patient safety is something that everyone can rally around. Who's going to say they're not for patient safety, right? And then it's a matter of teasing out what and where you would have the most impact on safe care for patients, benefits, and how they're constructed, access to providers, preparation of your members who are receiving care. What do they need to know, and how do they need to know that? And there are experts out there UIC being one. There are these resources that can be brought to these different industries. There's also some organizations like Patient Safety Movement Foundation that is getting agreements from the technology world about data sharing and interoperability of devices. These are going to be major, major breakthroughs once that we can keep up the energy to keep that moving.
Thank you for that. I agree with you that it's been quite sluggish. I've been doing patient safety for a long time, and you feel sometimes a bit like you're, trying to swim upstream. And so it just is really encouraging to hear your journey and really what the future of patient safety really brings. And I do agree that reliability, patient safety are really, we know what the definition of patient safety is. I think reliability is much more defined, and having those high reliability elements fold into an organization kind of makes other things kind of fall into place. And so I think that is our future.
Yeah, I think, and it speaks to engineers and
absolutely
and others in a way that patient safety often gets characterized as only what happens at the bedside.
Yes.
As you point out, there's all these tightly coupled parts of the system that if they fail to come together in a coherent way, risk is going to be increased for that patient.
Mm-hmm,
so don't give up. Don't give up. I believe this is possible. I really do.
Thank you. Great program.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Julie. I think we have time for one more question, if that's okay. One that just popped up for Julie. What are your 3 tips for mid-level managers looking to grow their careers in patient safety?
Okay. My bias is that the mid-manager is the most influential person in terms of creating safety. And very often that isn't emphasized enough. You're, universal translator. I think the important thing for mid-managers is your role in engaging the workforce, the entire workforce, engaging families and patients in their care. And if you look at any of the research that is out there, satisfaction and loyalty of a workforce is directly related to their relationship to their immediate supervisor. And Paul O'Neill gave me this tip once, and it's free, doesn't cost you anything, and it's really much more complicated than it appears. But if you cannot answer affirmatively, and your team cannot answer affirmatively to 3 questions, you will not be able to get the quality and safety that you aspire to. And that is, am I treated with dignity and respect by everyone that I encounter, regardless of position, pay grade, religion, gender, age, all those things that have us look different. Do I have what I need so I can contribute in a way that gives meaning to my work and my life? And am I recognized and thanked for what I do? And that recognition is usually knowing someone by name. I think that middle managers get caught in the tyranny of the urgent because you have so many demands. But I think really understanding the dynamics of production and protection and how that works. And Richard Cook, Illinois guy, he was at the university, he did some really important work around understanding the boundaries of safety. And I think that managers who know that and begin to implement that rigor within their own environments can do a lot of work And if you want to go into patient safety, make it known. Let people know that's your interest, and look for opportunities to gain more skills, mentoring, information.
Julie, I got to say, you're not only a wealth of knowledge and information, but you bring wisdom that I think only comes with unique experiences. So with that, are there any other, I guess, final thoughts on things you'd like to leave our participants with? So number one, and then two, is there any way individuals can follow you in your work?
Okay. Well, first of all, this work is messy because it's people. And, we tend to always think in linear fashion often, and this is anything but. Also that it takes partnerships. You need to forge partnerships and hold those very high and precious. There are probably 4 characteristics or attributes that I see in people that are successful in this work, and that's commitment and fidelity to it, the courage, because it gets kind of lonely, and there's oftentimes you're going to have to brush up against opposing thought and vision. It takes compassion. You've got to love this, and love, not romantic love, but agape. You want to do things to demonstrate your compassion and help people become what they can. And then it requires trust. And that is through transparency and trustworthy interactions over time. And there are no shortcuts. It becomes a way of life. And I'd encourage you to start thinking about those. And there was another part of that question that I lost track of.
And then the final part was, if individuals wanted to follow you or follow your work, is there a certain website, or are you open to a different kind of social media or something where they can follow you and stay in touch with your work?
George, I haven't done that yet. But now that I'm self-employed, But a lot of things end up on Google. I don't know how, but they do. So checking in on that. And, I could commit to get, to you things that are recently published, or I've got about 2 books and over 100 publications out there. So
I'm going to jump right in and say, I would love that. We're creating a new newsletter. Sharon's on the line, so she's responsible for the new newsletter. So anything you have, we would love to help and get the word out on. So yes, definitely.
Great. Well, I've had people I've had such good fortune and generous mentors and colleagues through the years that, anything that I can pay forward, I'm delighted to do so.
Well, I appreciate that. Julie, thank you very much. I appreciate it so much. Sean, I'm going to pass it back to you and Sharon. But again, Julie, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, George. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Julie. Thank you, George. Really, we're a little over here, but just wanted to kind of give one last plug here for the patient safety leadership programs. And Sharon Lanza, who is the program advisor, is on the line. So Sharon, if there's anything else you would like to say, I know we had joined us since the beginning, but essentially this is your contact information and information on the 2 programs, the graduate certificate and master's program in patient safety leadership. And I saw Dana giving us a shout out there. What's her big advice? Patient safety leadership program, patient safety leadership program. So thank you for that. But Sharon, any last words from you before we sign off?
Thank you very much, Julie, for being here with us today. We are honored and really appreciate it. And just to reiterate what Sean said, if anyone on here has any questions about the PSL program, don't hesitate to email me anytime or give me a call. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. And again, thank you, Julie, for your time. It was great. Thank you, George.
Bye now. Anytime.
Take care all. And thanks, everyone.